When we look back at history, we tend to see it in terms of politics, economics, battles. But what if one of the absolute darkest chapters in human history was actually a massive, terrifying psychological event? In this explainer, we're going to look at history not just as what happened, but why it happened, right down at the level of the human soul. It's this question, not just it haunts us, right? How can millions of people just surrender their will and follow one person, totally blindly, into an abyss? It feels like some kind of dark magic. But if you ask the psychologist Carl Jung, the answer isn't magic at all. Nope. It's a force that's hidden deep inside every single one of us. And this quote right here, this is the key to the whole thing. It's this idea that the parts of ourselves we deny, the things we push down, they don't just vanish. Oh no, they fester. They gather strength in the darkness. And sooner or later, they demand a way out, often in ways we can no longer control. All right, so to really get this, we need to unpack one of Jung's biggest ideas. It's a concept he called the shadow. Let's break down exactly what that means. Just think about it for a second, on a personal level. We all have a shadow. It's that part of our personality that holds our fears, our anger, our insecurities, all the stuff we'd really rather pretend doesn't exist. It's the darkness we all carry around, but usually refuse to even look at. Okay, but here's where it gets really big. Just like you have a personal shadow, Jung argued that entire nations can have a collective shadow. Imagine, it's formed from the shared, unspoken darkness of millions of people, a huge reservoir of national humiliation, bitterness, and this unacknowledged rage just bubbling under the surface. And this, of course, brings us to a very specific and tragic moment in history. Let's take this idea of a collective shadow and apply it to what was happening in Germany after World War I. The mood in Germany back then was, well, it was the perfect storm for this collective shadow to just burst out. The nation was wounded, and not just economically, but in its very soul. You had this profound sense of humiliation, total economic despair, and underneath it all, a powerful, simmering rage and a deep, deep desire for revenge. And right into that psychological vacuum stepped Adolf Hitler. Now, this was so important. He didn't create the darkness. He just gave it a voice. He basically became a mouthpiece for everything the German people were feeling but couldn't say out loud. He mirrored their unconscious rage and their wounded pride right back at them. So, and this is the crucial point, his almost hypnotic power, it wasn't really his own. It was the collective power of millions of people projecting their repressed shadow onto him. He became this vessel, filled to the brim with the unacknowledged fury and longing of an entire nation. So that brings us to the psychological mechanism that makes this whole thing possible. It's called projection. And man, understanding this is key to seeing how a whole society can completely lose its way. Projection is what we do when we just can't face something in ourselves. So instead of looking inward, we unconsciously throw that darkness onto someone else. We see our own anger or our own fear in them, not in ourselves. And when this happens on a national scale, it follows this terrifying path. Step 1, a whole society pushes down its inner darkness, all that humiliation and rage. Step 2, it finds a leader and projects all that shadow onto him. Step 3, that leader then embodies and acts out all of the nation's repressed desires. And the final, tragic step. The people surrender their individual freedom to follow their own shadow. So why would anyone do this? Well, because it offers a kind of relief, right? By making a leader the sole carrier of their darkness and their hopes, people get to avoid the incredibly painful work of looking in the mirror and confronting their own inner wounds. But the cost? Well, the cost is catastrophic. Because to give away your shadow is to give away your freedom. So let's zoom out for a second, because this isn't just a history lesson, not at all. It's a timeless warning about human nature itself. And that really is the fundamental lesson here. The psychological patterns that played out in the past, they don't just go away. The potential for this collective shadow to take over exists in any society at any time. The greatest danger is, and it always has been, the enemy within. And that's exactly why this matters so much, right here, right now. This isn't about pointing fingers at the past. It's about understanding a dynamic that is fundamentally human. Whenever we as a society refuse to look inward, we make ourselves vulnerable to being possessed by these unconscious forces. So what's the ultimate takeaway here? First, the darkness we ignore, it doesn't just disappear, it finds another way out. Second, refusing to face our own shadow makes us incredibly vulnerable to just handing our power over to someone else. And finally, the only real defense against this kind of collective catastrophe is individual courage. The courage for each of us to turn around and actually face our own shadow. And all of this leaves us with one final, very personal question. It turns this whole historical analysis right back on us. Because if we don't do the hard work of looking inward, history shows us, again and again, that the darkness will find a vessel. It will find a voice. The only question is, who will it be?